and they started shoveling money at this guy. They met him on about 3 different occasions in different locations around Europe, and on each occasion gave him about $40,000. So we're looking at quite a sizable amount of taxpayers' money going to this organisation that was trying to carry out a terrorist attack in Libya. Anyway, Shaler was briefed on this officially all the way through the plot, but he sort of thought it wouldn't happen. MI6 were always coming up with these sort of crackpot schemes. They wanted to play it being James Bond, but they very rarely actually did the work very effectively. So he was quite surprised when in early 1996 he started seeing intelligence reports coming across his desk, which said there had indeed been an attack. Colonel Gaddafi had been at the Libyan People's Congress in Sirte in Libya, and he was driving back in a cavalcade of cars. An explosion had occurred under one of those cars, the wrong one, obviously, because Gaddafi's now manifestly alive and now the new best friend of all our Western leaders. But innocent people were killed in that car, and also more people were killed, bystanders, cheering on their leader, in the ensuing security shootout. It's reckoned that I think 11 innocent people lost their lives that day because of the explosion that was funded by MI6. So what we're looking at is Britain and its intelligence agencies becoming a state sponsor of terrorism and blaming it on an Islamic extremist cell. We're also looking at an illegal operation because under the 1994 Intelligence Services Act in the UK, the one thing that is true about the James Bond films is the licence to kill. It's a bit of a weird one, but if an MI6 officer gets the written permission before doing something, for what would otherwise be an illegal act abroad, he gets legal immunity in the UK. So that includes up to and including murder. An MI6 officer, if he has the written permission from the Foreign Secretary, their political master, can go and do whatever he wants abroad and not face prosecution. And that's what should have happened in this case, but in fact it turned out that MI6 had not got that prior written permission. So we're looking at something which is immoral, it's unethical, it's highly reckless in a very volatile part of the world, and it murdered innocent people, but it's illegal under UK law as well. And that's why Shaler and I resigned from MI5, and we decided to blow the whistle. And I can't really think of anything more heinous that the spies could get up to. And you would think that the government would want to take evidence about that. How naive can you be? Anyway, we left in 1996, and in the UK we have this invidious piece of law called the Official Secrets Act, which is put in place to shut up whistleblowers. There's already other laws to protect real secrets, to prosecute traitors, but in 1989 this law came in too, and it basically says that anyone who is a serving or former intelligence officer can never say anything to anyone about the work they've done in MI5 or MI6. Otherwise, they face an unlimited fine and or up to 2 years in prison. And we knew this, but we also knew that what we were talking about was manifestly in the public interest, which is no defence under law, but you think you get a fair hearing at least because people would want to get to the truth. So as I said, we left and we decided to blow the whistle, and we went to the newspapers. That was the only way we could guarantee there would be publicity and it wouldn't be brushed under the carpet. We also, though, did not want to sit around waiting to be arrested in the UK. So we set the story in motion. The newspaper decided to run with it and gave us 3 days warning that our lives were about to be turned upside down. And we decided, we don't want to just get arrested and thrown in prison and have to wait for a trial about a year down the line. So we went on the run. In fact, we flew to Holland. Sorry, the Netherlands. I must never say Holland. It's a very British thing. We flew to the Netherlands. It was about the last flight out of the UK that weekend. This was in August 1997, because it was a bank holiday weekend and everyone was fleeing the country. And landed in Amsterdam and went on the run around the Netherlands, moving from hotel to hotel for a week as the story broke. And then after a week and doing a couple more interviews here, we decided to get as far away as fast as we could, which meant getting from, I think it was The Hague, all the way down to Bayonne, which is in the far southwest of France, by train in a day. And the whole thing just went bonkers. I mean, it's a long time ago now, 1997, but this story created worldwide headlines. And we had to move fast because we knew that MI5 was hot on our trail. And we did manage to hide out for quite a long time. The first month was literally on the run, moving around, night after night, different hotels, always looking over our shoulders. We thought we'd been tracked a couple of times by the surveillance branch, and we're literally prepared just to flee a hotel and go across the border to run ahead of them. And of course it was quite interesting because we were sort of gamekeeper turned poacher. We knew roughly how to stay onto the radar at that time and stay one step ahead. In fact, it was actually much more like being a real spy at that point than it was when we were working there. After about a month, or actually during that phase as well, what had happened is they decided to raid our home in London. And they sent in the Special Branch, which is the sort of secret police in the UK. And they rammed down the door and did a counter-terrorism style search of our flat. They had a warrant to do this, but only to take away material which related to MI5. And of course, there's nothing in our flat that related to MI5. But that didn't stop them ripping it apart. They pulled up the carpets, they pulled up the floorboards, they ripped the bath apart, they smashed up furniture. They even went into the pipes around the bath, and I don't know if they were looking for microfilm or something, shoved up the pipes, but they really ripped the place apart. They also, as well, the authorities, did a knee-jerk reaction. They took out an injunction in the media against any further disclosures, which gagged Shayla and me, and it also gagged the national media in the UK. Now, needless to say, a few years down the line, they dropped the injunction against the national media because that could lead to big, nasty trials and court hearings. But I think the injunction is still in place against Shayla, so he's a banned person. Anyway, so after a month of literally on the run, I knew that I had to go back to the UK. Up until that point, I'd just been sort of the girlfriend. I hadn't talked about my work in MI5 at that point. So you would think, actually, I hadn't broken the law, and I should be able to move freely around my country. But of course, I was arrested as I came into the country. I was actually picked up at the immigration desk, and they sort of hauled me off to a counter-terrorism style interview suite in the central London police station, where they grilled me for about 6 hours. And it was quite intensive. It was a weird experience. They were sort of reading out letters, you know, Dave and I had written each other and things like that, trying to pile on the psychological pressure. But they didn't use any thumb screws. It was quite good at that point. Anyway, they let me go free. I was never charged with anything, but they kept me on what they call police bail, which means I kept having to go back to the police station to answer this bail for a period of about 6 months. And I went back to try and pack up the wreckage of our flat. And as I said, it was quite something. You know, it was completely ripped apart. But they'd also had a lot of fun. I mean, these were special branch officers, people I'd worked with and knew. They'd even gone through my underwear drawer and things, you know, obviously had great fun in there. It was quite freaky. During that time as well, they tried to pile on pressure because it wasn't just me who was arrested. Shayla's brother was arrested too, 2 of his best friends in coordinated dawn raids on trumped-up charges. And again, they were never charged with anything, but they were kept on police bail to try and keep Shayla under control, you know, some sort of leverage on him. Also during this case, we saw a number of supporters arrested and hassled, and journalists. In some cases, they were charged and convicted because they dared to cover some of these stories. It was nutty. I mean, it's, you know, you're trying to get the truth out about criminality within the spy agencies, and it's all the people around you who get hauled through the courts. Anyway, after packing up the flat, I decided to rejoin David in Europe, and at this point he'd holed up in a very remote little farmhouse, which had belonged to a friend of a friend. It was right in the middle of France, due south of Paris by about 200 miles, and it was very primitive. Of course, it was miles away from any shop. We had to walk everywhere pretty much because we couldn't have a car because that would have been traceable. No heating, very little money. It was very, very primitive. It was like going back to the 19th century. The only access we had to the outside world was a very cumbersome laptop, but at least at that point we could watch some BBC News on it, so we had a rough idea of what was going on in the outside world. And we stayed there for 10 months. And during that time, we tried to talk to the government, say, look, we've got all this evidence. Can you please take evidence of high crimes and misdemeanours going on in the spy agencies? Plus the fact, you know, we know they've got files on you. Aren't you a bit concerned about that? They didn't seem to like that. Anyway, the first newspaper reports had been about the lower level stuff, things like files on government ministers, illegal phone taps, and what have you. The newspapers didn't have the balls to cover the Gaddafi plot initially. And David kept trying to get them to do this, and also to pressurise the government to investigate this, to take the evidence and look at it. And they just refused. They strung us along. So after about 10 months in hiding, in desperation, he set up a website called Shayla.com, as was. But if you look for it now, I think it's been turned into some Russian porn site. It's the way of all flesh. At that time, it was quite a good website, and he, of course, hosted it in America, because at that point, America still had a constitution with basic democratic rights. And the government actually had the gall to write to the California web server that was hosting it, web company that was hosting it, and said, actually, there's an injunction against Mr. Shayla. Do you mind taking this down? And the California company just stuck two fingers up at them and said, do you not remember 1776? You've got no jurisdiction in this country, bog off. Mind you, that was America then, this is now, probably wouldn't happen that way now. Anyway, so after 10 months, gets the website going, begins to say he's going to put the Gaddafi plot details up there, and also goes back to the newspapers and said, right, come on, let's cover this now. Enough time's gone by, go with the story. So in the end of July 1998, we got to Paris, we start meeting the journalists, we do the story, they've got all the details. And the British government decides, after 10 months of ignoring us, that now is the time that we're an urgent threat, and they issue an extradition request for Shayla to the French. And the French, of course, have to do this, they have to apply this. So we're staying in this Paris hotel. In fact, we moved hotels because, I don't know, our hackles were up, we thought something was wrong. Instinct, I suppose. And they still tracked us down. And he was hauled away and thrown into prison, and he was there for about 4 months awaiting the extradition hearing. But for most of that time, he was banned from seeing anybody but his lawyer. His family wasn't allowed to see him, I wasn't allowed to see him, because the British had lied to the French and said he was some traitor selling secrets to an enemy power. Now, when the French got the paperwork, they realised all they were dealing with was a whistleblowing case. And the French, bless them, do not extradite people for whistleblowing. They say that it is manifestly a political action, and they're not going to extradite people for political actions. I think also they took great pleasure in pissing off the British government. The French, indeed, yes. I do like them. So, Shayla was then a free man, but he was stuck in France at that point, because if he'd even tried to go to any other European country, the British would have tried the same old trick, try and extradite him, and we couldn't guarantee that other countries at that point would necessarily uphold his freedom. So he spent another 2 years, literally, he was stuck in exile in France, holing up there in a lovely little flat. And so if you ever want to go on the run, go to Paris, it's beautiful. It's definitely a good place to live. And we took it as far as we could. I mean, we did a lot of campaigning while we were there. And I used to spend most of my time going backwards and forwards, Paris to London, trying to lobby the MPs and the journalists and deal with the lawyers and raise the profile of the case. And during this time, other information emerged, particularly around the Gaddafi plot. In, I think it was March 2000, a leaked document from MI6 appeared on the internet, and this proved the Gaddafi plot. I think it's still up there somewhere. It was mirrored all over sites like Cryptome at the time. Basically saying that it had happened as Shayla had blown the whistle. So there was a huge, huge scandal in the British media at that time. Huge calls as well from them. Finally, they were saying to the government, look, we've got to have an inquiry. This looks like it's true, and this is murder on the part of MI6. And yet the government still managed to wriggle its way out of this. They managed to spin their way out. They said, oh, Shayla's a fantasist, we don't know. We're not adding or subtracting from our previous comments about this case. He's just making it up. So there's still to this day never been an inquiry into murder by MI6. MI6 officers conspiring to commit murder and becoming state sponsors of terrorism. It's just quite astonishing. It's quite astonishing. And yet during this time as well, student activists, I said, would come over sometimes to interview David and things like that, and they'd go back and they would be arrested. There was one infamous case. There's a young woman called Julianne Davis who was sitting in her lecture theatre at university, and suddenly all these special branch officers appeared and hauled her out of the lecture theatre and charged her under the treachery laws in the UK. They, I think, thought she might have something to do with the Gaddafi plot document that appeared. I don't know, in their warped mind. Anyway, she's suing the arses off them for wrongful arrest at the moment. It's going through the courts. So we took it as far as we could when we were in Paris. We had 3 years in total in France, but in 2000, later in 2000, we went back to the UK. And Shayla knew that he would be put on trial for breaches of the Official Secrets Act, but he wanted his day in court because at that point he thought it would be the only way he could get evidence about the Gaddafi plot and the other stuff out in open in the court of law. And he was only ever charged with the very early stuff, files on politicians, illegal phone taps. They never charged him, of course, with any of the more serious stuff, talking about the Gaddafi plot, talking about the Israeli embassy, talking about the IRA bombs, because they didn't want those ventilated in the courtroom. And you would have thought, well, okay, they're going to do that. 6 months down the line, he'll be in the Old Bailey, in the dock, in front of a jury of his peers, and he will at least have his say. It didn't quite work out that way. It was over 2 years before he had his trial. And in those 2 years, the government ensured that he was locked down and locked down and locked down from what he could say and what he could do